how often when Lynx is talking to someone about instructions, we might start off saying one thing, like go to such and such a place to get carrots, and then the more we talk in the conversation, because of information we later find out, we will change that to don't go to such and such a place and get carrots, and go someplace else. And repeatedly we find that the students are hearing portions of what we say and not hearing other portions. In other words, when at the point of our making a change, they remember what we said first before we made the change more than they remember the change, which means that it sounds like they're thinking about something we said while we're saying something else, instead of listening to everything we say as we say it. Don't let your computers work on something we've just said while we're still trying to say something else. And you could be helpful by, like T brought up the cornbread thing when T was talking about not letting the batter sit too long. That just overrode everything and translated that we'll make up all the cornbread and let everybody be served cold cornbread, which wasn't the intent at all. It was a misapplication of instructions, which is part of what we're going to talk to you about. We've got to lick this misapplication of instructions.
Let me give another example, because I think one's back at Christ that understands that. The last crew that was up here, when we noticed that Alex Soda was coming up with this group, they said that Alex Soda was a satellite 3 person coming up. And we said Alex Soda could not come up as a satellite 3 person. But that didn't mean that they would bump that Alex Soda and put somebody else in so that we would have a satellite 3 person. It meant that it was perfectly okay for Alex Soda to come up, but he could not be as a satellite 3 person, the way they mentioned it to us. Y'all remember that? And they, by the time it got back to the class, they interpreted it that Alex Soda couldn't come on this retreat group because he couldn't be a satellite 3 person. Which there are times when there are no satellite 3 people coming in the retreat group. Isn't that right? So why would you bump Alex Soda because of what we said? The reason for that wasn't that there is anything wrong with Alex Soda. It's because he's not able to function as a satellite 3 people without a check partner, and he wouldn't have a check partner.
They said, we always try to make it if we can, so that a satellite 3 person can be in a retreat crew going to retreat. And we said, yes, that's fine, but you don't do it at the expense of having to get them out of the order in which they should be going. You follow what we're saying? But we couldn't count the number of times that our instructions have been twisted. And you want to be aware of how your vehicles twist instructions. And you want to exert special effort to find out if you're twisting instructions. Let's take I feel like Sayodi has innocently twisted instructions, or I'm not understanding everything. Like this morning, I asked him about how his new task was going, and he said, well, it's not exactly like the other 2 times I was over there because the dishwasher didn't show up, and the chef was having to pitch in and wash dishes, and they had to bring in somebody from someplace else. And I said, well, did you offer to help in the dishwashing? And he said, no, he didn't. And I suspect, though I may be wrong, that he was thinking he shouldn't, from what we've said about washing dishes. Is that correct, Sayuri?
Yes.
Well, see, that's not right. Lynx has never indicated that you all, when we said we didn't want you going out and taking jobs washing dishes, and we didn't want people taking advantage of you. But does that mean that when a crew is short-handed and everybody is having to pitch in, that we would have one of our students be the one not to pitch in and do things like scrub pots and pans, or even scrub the floor, or any other thing that had to happen as an exception? Now, we said, if it turns out that and then he said, well, I told him from the beginning that they have to do this, and then my brain just short-circuited, and I thought, well, then why did you apply for the job? Because if you know we don't want you doing pots and pans regularly, then we shouldn't, or the people wouldn't show up. In other words, you can't go and say, I'd like this job very much, and I'm a dessert person, and I'm just making this up. But you can't go and say, I'll do this and this and this and this, but I don't wash windows. I don't do pots and pans. I'm not going to let you step on me. I'm not going to let you take advantage of me. It means you didn't understand what Links was talking about in the beginning. Because what Links was talking about in the beginning is that you go out and be the best employee that you can be. We don't want you looking for manual labor tasks. But that didn't mean that in an emergency situation that you wouldn't pitch in and be a part of the crew that needed to do anything that needed to happen. Now, if it turned out that emergency situations were more ordinary than extraordinary, and that you were washing pots and pans more than you were doing anything else, then we'd say, look, that's not what you took the job for. Let's see if we can get another one. But this is another example how we have seen you go from one extreme to the other. We have seen people who would let people step all over them instead of sticking to your guns on instructions. Like if you took a car in to be repaired and the service manager says, I don't think that's right, you need so-and-so. We said, stick to your guns and tell them what Links has told you we think needs to be done. Okay, the other extreme of that is so much so that a time or two people have done it in such a way that it irritated the service manager and made it sound like they were mad, or they were being arrogant, or they were being so impossible. And at that point, don't you know that humans break down? And they're not going to service you. They're not going to be helpful to you if you go in and set them off now, listen to me, this is the way I want it done, and that's it. If you've got to stick to your guns diplomatically. You've got to do it in a way that they appreciate the fact that you're sticking to your guns. You don't start bumping noses with them or bucking with them unless it's a situation where you have no choice. You've tried your diplomatic efforts. You've tried to cooperate with them. You've tried to do everything in a way that you could stick to your guns and still have a smooth outcome, and it didn't work. If it didn't work, then you're kind of at your wit's end. You either have to buck with them or you have to throw up your hands and call for help. But we've got to tell us what the score is so we can understand it better. Like, what did you mean when you said, well, he told me from the outset that this happens frequently.
Well, he said he had a hard time getting help and that was something that he had told me in the beginning, that he finds himself washing pots to just get it done, because he doesn't do it, no one will do it.
Well, then why didn't you tell us that? Why didn't you let us know that when you started applying for the job? That here's a position where the chef has told us that frequently people won't show up and he ends up washing the pots. Because I wouldn't be able to work for a chef who was washing the pots and pans while I was making desserts.
What did you do while he was washing pots and pans?
I was making a soup that he wanted to make.
Well, okay, that's okay. If he says, like if I offered to wash the pots and pans, and he says, no, I want you to make a soup, I'll fill in here. Great. But I would feel obligated to offer to the chef to wash the pots and pans. And I would want to. That's why I asked you, did you offer to wash them? Did you offer to wash them? Well, see, this is where it goes wrong. Because to me, if you're under the chef and he's having to do something like that, you want to give the feeling of one who is cooperative and can pitch in and wants to be helpful. We feel like Salyuti's had bad luck a time or two with tasks, and it may be because he's misapplying the instructions we've given him. Because he's standing up for his guns so that they think, well, good night. Who do you think you are? You ought to be, have an office in Washington instead of here at the kitchen. Do you see what I'm saying? Because that would be a misapplication of instructions. When we say don't let people walk over you, that doesn't mean you go in with your nose in the air and lay down the guidelines of what you'll do in this task. What you do is go find out what the task requires. And if it isn't according to guidelines, you go elsewhere looking for a job.
Sure. What you have to do when you have an out-of-craft task is really develop a feeler. And all of you have to develop a feeler. You've got to learn to feel what is right. A good employee doesn't ever tell an employer, I won't do something. And we're not asking any of you to tell an employer that I don't do something or imply that I won't do it. Now, of course, that's within the job task. I'm not talking about they want you to go rob the bank or something, something on that order. Because I'm throwing that in because you could throw that back at us later and say, well, they asked us to go do this, rob that bank, and you said for us to do anything they asked us to do, And believe it or not, you all are capable of going to that extreme.
And if you question the rightness of it, then get a note off to Sat 3 and let them get it off to Lynx so that we can see what's happening. Like Gastody once didn't feel right about his boss asking him to take drinks into the locker room to men who into the sauna when men ordered drinks and said, I'll give you $10 or whatever it was if you go get me a beer and bring it into the sauna. And he didn't feel right about doing it. Tina didn't see anything wrong in his task. Why he shouldn't do it? But the point is he refused. And he refused a number of things out there and it got his job almost in hot weather because they were thinking that he just had too many areas. He wanted his job to only do these things and not do those things. So what you do is like T said, try to be sensitive with your feeler, try to discover what the task is before you take it, and try to feel, does it feel right? Is the things that I'm going to be doing, do I think they're within the guidelines of what Lynx intends for us to be willing to do? And if the answer to that is yes, then take the task. Then if it turns out later that it's expanded into areas that you're beginning to question, bring it up and let us help you with it before you cut your nose off, before you make a situation where they begin to dislike you. And they can dislike you on the grounds that you think you're doing what Lynx would have you do. We wouldn't have you in a task where they dislike you unless they're impossible or they're disliking you because you won't join in as they snort cocaine or whatever it is that they're doing. If there are things like that, we would like to have you immediately try to get something else. Do you see what we're saying? But we think you are more capable of knowing what our intentions are than just grabbing on little pieces of things that we say and then letting them over a short period of time distort and creating an impossible circumstance for yourself.
The mind just has to push through and understand better. It's like the brain is just blocking you from understanding what we're saying. And you have to exert the effort to understand what we're saying. You may think you know because you think Tim Bell has said this over and over again and I know exactly what they're going to say, but it turns out that you don't know what they're saying.
That's right. It's just Your vehicle is making it sound like you're hearing a repeat.
It's getting to where I'm almost afraid to say something. Afraid that it will be translated into something else. And I think, how can I say something where they can understand what I'm saying? And even right now, I wonder. Of course, we have it on tape, but I still wonder how we're going to translate into your brain. Now, you have got to push through and understand what we're saying. The reason we're putting this on tape is because if there are others back at the craft who have out-of-class tasks, and they are having the same kind of misunderstanding as Coyote has had, then we hope that this will help clarify it. Now, when you are at a task, you should be mentally, when you are in the out-of-class task or in the class, you should be mentally alert. So much so that I've watched one individual in this class do things that looks like it's just mechanical. Like there's no mind really operating in that vehicle at that time. And it disturbs me because I feel like that individual can be caught in a trap, that it could just slip into a nothingness, a despondency. And the only time...
On a passiveness.
A passiveness, so much so that it can cause you trouble. And a member of the next level, you have never seen us walk around with a mechanical air about us. We are your examples. You have to be mentally alert. You've got to be observant. You've got to listen carefully. When you all talk to us, we listen to you as carefully as we can, unless we have a distraction. And then if we have a distraction because of something one of the others, Tia Doma, be saying to us, and we might take what we're listening to from you, listening to you, and go to one of us, then we will go back and say, I'm sorry, we missed what you were saying, and would you tell us again? Now, we're teaching you all how to listen to older members. You all can't do that. Only older members can do it, like your teachers. Actually, it isn't right for us to do it. But when there are two older members working together in a class circumstance, sometimes it does happen. But it doesn't mean that you all can do that to older members. It's like if we're talking to you on the caller and somebody says something to you and you come back and say, I'm sorry, so-and-so was telling me something and I didn't hear what you just got through saying. Now that has happened to us many, many times. And that should not happen any more than if we were standing here talking to you and all the activity around the room, you started watching what Dan Sodi or Liv Odie was doing. In fact, we were talking to Coyote. And then, before you know it, I could ask you, what was Dan Sodi and Liv Odie doing? And you could tell us every little action that they were doing. And then I'd say, well, what was I telling you? And you wouldn't even know what we were talking about. Can you understand that? And
you're not capable of doing both. You're not capable of listening carefully and doing other things. They think you are.
That means you're interested more in Dan Sodi and Liv Odie than in what we're saying. So then why do we exert the effort to tell you anything? So you've got to understand this because it's extremely important that you get your minds into your vehicle. When you walk as a member of the next level. When you talk as a member of the next level. You do not just walk around mechanically and pick up things and look at it and put it down and try on a jacket without any expression on your face, without anything other than you look like a puppet or a robot or something. When you're at your out-of-class task, you are alert. You know what your tasks are. You participate in everything as though you enjoy it. when you leave the class, you come back and that's the end of your leave your task. You leave that job at your place where you work. You come back here and you work in the class as though you like it, and you are alert. You know what is going on. You are interested in what's going on. You've got to push through. And the vehicle will not do it automatically. It is not trained to do that. Your mind has to do it. And as soon as you realize that, the better you will be, and we will be able to communicate with you. But if you don't do it, we are not going to be able to communicate with you. We have reached this place before, and we felt like we just can't communicate with you. And then you all exert the effort, and we're able to do it, and then we get to another spot where we can't communicate, which means that it's just a process of growth. There's nothing wrong with any of you. It's just that you have to put it into action. It will not happen on its own.
But let me use this conversation with Kadoti again as an example, because it's there were little ramifications that could have come into his mind at one point that, since they weren't resolved, I don't think his brain computed it. Let's go back over the conversation. Kadoti was talking to me last night about we were going to take a car into the shop. And first we had said that they would get it there somewhere between 7:30 and 9. And then a little later in the conversation, I said, no, why don't you just get up and get at the top of the bath stops and consume and get off as quickly as you can. And at that point, T heard me say that, and T then said, which of course Kadoti couldn't hear, what T had said, no, let's get in there at 7:30. And then I said, no, let's get there at 7:30, which Kadoti repeated to me, get there at 7:30. But I didn't say, that means you might have to alter your uptime and so forth and so on. So it didn't compute. So what computed was to get there as close to 7:30 as they could, getting up on time and consuming as soon as they could, and they got off at 7:50, which in his mind, they got down there at 7:50, which in his mind was a correct instruction. Now the point I'm making is that only one time did I say, no, let's get there at 7:30. But it didn't make a strong enough impression in the computer to think about, oh, well, then that means that what we said a few minutes ago about getting at the top of the bath slot and consuming, that means that won't work. So would you have us get up earlier if necessary to get there at 7:30? Because if he had computed that and asked that question, the answer would be, well, yes, of course, if you can't. In other words, we don't feel like we have to know what you can do, what you have to do in order to get there at 7:30. You see what I'm saying? I feel like if you can't get up at 6:30 and consume and get off in time to do that at 7:30, then you have to alter in order to get there at 7:30. And if you feel like, well, Lynx hasn't okayed you getting up early, then you've got to come back and say, I don't think we can get up on time and get there at 7:30, so that we can have a chance to say, well, then get up early if necessary. But when it got to be after 7 and you all hadn't left, I couldn't imagine what had happened. But this is just a little example of how that can just one sentence said, no, let's get there at 7:30, and there'd been dozens of other sentences that hadn't been that explicit. You see what we're saying? And so the brain didn't grab hold of that one and say, everything we previously talked about has now been altered, and this means we're going to get there at 7:30. Now this happens a lot, not just with Kadoti, it happens with others, almost without exception. That's frequently it's the key thing that we say in the whole conversation that gets that gets lost?
Well, it's like the Cornbread incident. When the key thing was to plan your strategy so you would have hot cornbread for both crews. And none of you had it, I don't believe, did you? Did the first crew have it all?
Now, I want to know from Sawyoti. See, I'm afraid that you got the picture that you were to present yourself in a way that you wouldn't do tasks of that nature, or I don't understand why you wouldn't have said to your chef last night, goodness, can I help you out of this bind? And then given him the option to say, no, this is part of what I have to live with because people don't like to get out here, and you go ahead and do your soup. But to me, if I had hired someone in a lesser position than my own position, and they didn't offer to do a more menial task than their task when I was having to do it, I would wonder what kind of spirit they were, what kind of cooperative nature they had. You see what I'm saying? Did that not cross your mind?
Yes, I believe it did, but I'm not strong.
Well, it would have been my very first thought that he would think poorly of me if I didn't offer to do that, his having to do it. Particularly when I'm new and I'm wanting to make a good impression. You see what I'm saying?
Well, I knew he gave you the task of making the soup, among some other tasks, because that's what you wanted to see what I could do.
Well, sure.
So I guess I looked at it. Plus the fact that...
Well, now, see, I don't know the whole picture, but I'm trying to piece this apart together that I got from you. And it might be that the way he was giving you instruction made it very clear to you, without his saying it, that he wanted to do that and wanted you to go ahead and doing what you're doing. And if he did, then I can understand it. But I don't know the whole picture, but I do know that you should give an impression with your employer, and that nothing is beneath you, even though you didn't take the job to do dishes, and you don't want to do something like that on a regular basis, hopefully. Because I'd really rather find another job if I have to end up doing that all the time. But it's like with Annie Odie. We didn't know that she was doing pots and pans on a regular basis. We thought that she was asked to do it on rare exceptions. Next thing we knew, it was a regular occasion, and part of her regular task was pots and pans. And we immediately said, Annie Odie, that's taboo.
That's when you step in and say, you let us know about it. But once in a while, it doesn't hurt.
There's an awkwardness you all have got to get past. Sawyoti had an awkwardness over his address, and it's like he got caught in a couple of stories about wrong giving street numbers that didn't exist. And you all have got to be sharper than that and more comfortable with your strategy. You've got to plan it so that you can't be in a circumstance like that. If I'm going to use a street number, I've got to know that street, I'm certainly not going to give a 10,300 if I don't know if the street's even 6 blocks long. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to have to automatically give down in the first few hundreds if I'm not familiar with that street. I would automatically have to think that way, and you all are capable of thinking that way. You're just not exerting the effort. And then you get caught. Twice he got caught from the same person and personnel on information that had no truth to it. Which means that, and part of this I think he was nervous about the new task. He was a little insecure because of the 2 bad experiences he has recently had. And deflating his ego to an extent. But you have got to not let people deflate your confidence. Now, the only reason your confidence has ever any reason to be deflated is if you are trying to do a task the way Lynch would have you do it, and the more you try, you don't seem to be accomplishing anything. Then I would, my confidence would be threatened a little bit, and I'd have to work harder to get it restored. But something that a human can do to me tended you, that couldn't threaten my confidence at all, or make me deflated. But if I had had an experience like Sawyer did with Tim, I was running now, wait a minute. There could be, I don't know why, no matter what kind of impossible person Tim seemed to be, something must be wrong with me that I wasn't capable of getting along with him. Why I couldn't go in and do a good task and be liked. I must say things that sound a little wrong, present myself in a way that doesn't seem likable. Something about me has caused others to dislike me. But how can I change that? And all of you need to examine that kind of thing. If you're in a task, in craft or out of craft, and you find yourself in a predicament where others find it difficult to cooperate with you, then examine yourself and wonder what it is that makes it that way.
It's very difficult to work as a member of when you're a member of the next level, work with humans when there's conflict. And so it's always better to try to get rid of conflict by examining yourself and also observing that individual to see how you can get along with that person. Now, if it's impossible to get along with that individual, then you'll find out eventually. But the game can be, how can you get along with that person? It's just like working with each other. None of you should be so impossible that I don't like to work with so-and-so. I don't like to work with him because or her because of such and such. That's all garbage. That's all human garbage. And you all should know everybody's likes and dislikes and shouldn't pay a bit of attention to any time they might say something that could affect you. Well, now you know that there isn't a single person here who could do any harm to you.
There are some in your class who there are a number of people who have difficulty getting along with them. Okay? And just follow my little formula here. There's some individuals in your class who, because of certain characteristics they still have not conquered, a number of people find it difficult to get along with them. But there are others in your class who can get along with those individuals and have mastered how not to let those characteristics that they're still trying to conquer disturb them in the least. And they can get maximum performance in cooperation with those individuals that others find it impossible to get along with. So where's the trouble? With the person that's impossible or the person that hasn't learned to get along with it? And the person that's difficult, he's got a lot to work on. But the person who can't get along with him, he's got a lot to work on just as much. Because he hasn't learned to get along with him. He hasn't mastered anything. He's only good at getting along with people that are easy to get along with. You see what we're saying? So he hasn't learned to get along with people that require little effort to get along with. And there's no difference when some of your classmates are working on certain kinks in their personality that are difficult than areas that you are working on that are less obvious. There's no difference, and none of you are free of serious areas that need work. Therefore, there's no justification for not learning the art of getting along with anyone. Okay? Are we true? Lady?
Maybe this is appropriate, but there wasn't an instruction to give an example like that. I'm trying to see if my being twisted this. You told us that you're talking about, I believe, digestion and eating, consuming to forget. You said that you twist the noodles, don't you? You get the sauce off and the meat, and that way that doesn't interfere with your digestion. The meat and the excess. And I interpreted that at one point, and another person did that. When you're done, you leave the meat and sauce on the plate and consume all the noodles. And then I talked to Logodi about that, and he said, I don't believe that's true. He said, because we serve links, their spaghetti sauce, then when it comes back,
they don't serve us.
We're not serving it.
We prepare our own.
Right, but they give you the sauce or something like
No, they don't.
No, they don't.
The new ones.
No, they don't have a cleaning part. They just give us
They clean our plates sometimes.
Oh, okay. They give you the new.
That's right. And you know why they clean our plates and they don't find sauce and spaghetti on our plates? That's why. Because we scrape our own plates.
Okay, so I got more information. Do that. Okay.
So we don't say you, the sauce is okay. It's the meat we're not encouraging you to eat.
No, we're not saying, see, either one is an extreme. If I try to eat my spaghetti so that all sauce and meat is left off, I'm going to an extreme. But if I eat my spaghetti and I clean up the sauce and meat that's left on my plate, I'm going to another extreme. We say that the sauce and meat that goes with your spaghetti can't hurt you, but that you shouldn't have so much sauce on there that there's a lot of concentrated sauce and meat that you would follow up that experiment up with.
And we don't eat very much of the meat. We eat very little of the meat, and we did that.
That's right. Now, the meat we consider more flavoring for the spaghetti. And we consume only what little meat might stick to the spaghetti as we consume it, as we roll it up in little baseballs. But that doesn't mean we try on every little baseball to be sure that every little piece of meat is off of it. That's an extreme. But we just don't feel that the concentrated sauce and meat is good for you enough that you should clean up what's left in your plate, and that that you should try not to have so much sauce with it. There would be puddles of it left after you ate your spaghetti.
Like they were consuming it with spoons after they'd eaten all the spaghetti, which we said not to do. You shouldn't have that much sauce. That you will have to clean up your plate with a spoon. And this is what we're not encouraging you to do.
When I first got that instruction, I followed what you said. Now the meat that was residual in the sauce, and just consumed what I could, twisting it. And then I went to someone else in my vehicle did a number. Everyone justification each person, and the
if your vehicle likes it, it's going to find a way. It's like the vehicle. If you all could learn your vehicle and how it. You can bank on doing exactly what it likes to do if it comes to food. In other words, the voice sounds when somebody asks a question about consuming, their voice comes in my mind entirely different tone of voice is recorded in my brain, or I receive it, because it's like saying, I like this, I hope you will say exactly what I want to hear, And I know it. And it's just like, if you all could realize that, it's...
and my mind reacts in just the opposite, and dislikes what my vehicle has just indicated to me that it likes so much. So much that I tend to go the other way and be more turned off than would be normal if I hadn't seen a prejudice from my vehicle in favor of it. Do you see what I'm saying?
In a sense, that's the key right there. Your vehicle's going to start its con job.
Well, sure. It's like ice cream. If your vehicle looks forward to the ice cream, then your mind ought to step in immediately and say, ice cream isn't that good.
Starts thinking yourself.
Well, and it isn't. It isn't.
Sure.
Because your mind doesn't care if it gets any ice cream. It doesn't have a means of enjoying it.
Right. It's cake day. Oh, boy, it's cake day. That's your vehicle talking. Your mind certainly isn't talking. And your mind should immediately realize the symptoms that the vehicle is looking forward to the cake. And you don't have to eat a piece of cake. And if I was having that kind of trouble, I wouldn't touch a piece of cake.
Your mind doesn't feed the vehicle like a human feeds the horse sugar to keep the horse happy. To give it something something that isn't good for it, just to keep it happy. The mind considers that it has the ability to control the vehicle and keep it operating and functioning well without giving in to it, without doing all the little things to satisfy it. That doesn't mean that it goes to the other extreme and is difficult with the vehicle. It tries to do it without giving into it and without trying to be too harsh on it. Both are out of balance. To be too harsh on the vehicle and to give into it. They're out of balance. The proper way, when you have the vehicle in control, is to get the performance from the vehicle that you want without any backstop, one way or the other, positive or negative. You see what we're saying? You just want to get the performance out of it. Therefore, you know that it requires X amount of nutrition and consuming, but it doesn't require X amount of sugar, or X amount of this, or things that the vehicle has particular yin for. And so it doesn't give in to those, but neither does it go to the other extreme. It's not when we told you the big test is, can I have a little something once in a while without making it a big to-do? Can I learn to ignore it? Like if I really like ice cream, I'll skip some of my ice cream opportunities, and when I have my ice cream, I'll learn not even to look forward to it. It's just some other ingredient that I'm having.
Like it's just unleaded gas that you're getting at the service station. Cars don't look forward to getting super unleaded. Or just plain old regular. They just get it because they're running out of gas. And this is how you should look at food. Food is just gas. That well, it is, isn't it? It's fuel that you're putting into your vehicle.
You know, talking about gas for a moment, I think that still one of the biggest problems we have with vehicles that have gas problems is because they aren't chewing well enough. Because the more you chew and pulverize that food, the less it creates fermentation in your digestive system, and the more natural enzymes break it down and prevent gas. So one of the main things you can do, and I have to keep my own vehicle disciplined in the area of chewing, particularly when I have only one little tiny spot that I can chew on. And you get awfully tired of shoveling everything to that one little spot and chomping so loud.
Have to use the front teeth. Another example, this doesn't apply to just likes and dislikes in regards to food. It's likes and dislikes to anything. Let's use the TV, for instance. One individual, while he was here at retreat, wanted to change the time of consuming so that he could watch the news. Now that's pretty bad. It may not. I think it happened in Blackhawk. It hasn't happened recently, but when you have thoughts like that, that means you're hooked on television, because we have not given you an assignment to watch the news. Now if we say, we don't want you to miss a single news item on television, no matter what, don't give us any excuses. We want everything watched on television in regards to news. Then you would have to alter your schedule to watch the news. But the news is optional. And we know things are happening out there, and they're going to happen whether we watch TV or not. And when the time comes, when it's time for the news and you're free of what you're supposed to be doing, then it's okay to watch it. But the world doesn't stop just for you to see the news. You don't plan your schedule so that you can see the news. If you're through with everything in the class, and the news is on, and you feel like you can sit down and do it, then it's okay to do it. But otherwise, it isn't imperative that you see it.